Thank you so much, Jason. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I am Lava. This is my first time modulating a panel, so I'm really, really excited and nervous at the same time. So forgive me if I am a little nervous right now, but I am going to get started. So I would love to, for each one of our speakers, to briefly introduce yourself and how you become involved in the trailer industry. Jake, do you want to get started?
Sure. Hey guys, my name is Jake Warren. It's great to be here. Thank you, Lava. So I'm from London originally. I've been in LA for about 3 years and I've made the move into trailers very slowly. It was a natural progression for me from making music for TV commercials, in-show, TV promos. And the holy grail for me is trailers because of the high level of craft that goes into it. So it's been really, really fun getting into that and studying it, and hopefully can share some things with you tonight that I've learned along my way.
I'm Luke Forrest. I'm a trailer editor. I work at Wildcard Creative Group. I got into trailers after like a year of being in LA and just meeting up with a friend of a friend who did it. And he showed me around Wildcard and I was like, oh, I like it here. So, yeah, and I liked what they did and then learned it and loved it. So, yeah.
Hello, my name is Derek. I'm a music supervisor also at Wildcard. My start was a little unorthodox. I was studying to be a physical therapist, and Filipino parents, that's the only thing you could do, And while I was in school, I found music supervision, and then I was kind of like, oh, this is a real job, and I kind of looked into it. And when I graduated, I was like, I'm gonna give myself like 6 months to just see what it's about, and then the 6 months turned into years of different internships and networking and just trying to get in the space and doing that, like unpaid internships for a few years. Meeting the right people led me here, and now I'm doing this, I think.
Thank you guys so much. And for me, I moved to LA about 3 years ago. My first job was at Wildcard Creative, which is where I meet Derek and Luke. And I started as a music coordinator and learn about, sync licensing, music supervision for the first time. I had my backgrounds as an artist, so for me, it wasn't as difficult to sort of understand a lot of creative stuff, but it was definitely a very different route to wrap my head around the business side of things. So afterwards, I moved to Trailer Park, and I've been there since, it's been like almost 3 years now, and I'm currently an associate music supervisor at Trailer Park. And I wanted to get into the topics that we're going to discuss today, which is, approach to music selection in trailers and the specific trailer cue elements. So I want to get started with a few questions, and some of these are directed to each one of you guys, but like if you have any thoughts, anybody can just chime in anytime. And the first one is to Derek mostly. How do you approach the initial music selection process for a trailer as a music supervisor? Like what factors do you typically consider when choosing a song? There's so many production libraries out there, so many artists, labels. Like what kind of factors go into your process?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of look at the project, look who the studio is, the client is, who our internal team is, because as you know, music is extremely subjective. And for me, I look at it more as kind of problem solving than using just like my creative, I guess, opinion dictate it. Because like for him or a different editor, I won't necessarily pull the same music because they all have different cutting styles or they like lean a certain way towards a genre of music. And yeah, kind of dissect from there, it's like, I always kind of equate it to being like a wedding DJ, like there's so many different demographics, like there's kids, there's a grandpa, adults, whatever. And like, you kind of want to pick the thing that brings everyone to the dance floor, it's like, not everyone is going to join. So you kind of want to do the best that you can to get the most people excited. And hopefully that's the studio, but you want to do it with all teams involved and you kind of go from there.
I've heard from like a couple of music supervisors who've been doing this for years that it really is about like learning the styles and sort of like the forte of each editor and the studio preferences. But like, how much of your personal creative input do you think that you get to put into each project?
It depends on the project. I try and like slide myself. I would say it's maybe like 20-30%, and then the rest would be like catered to whoever, my editor, producer, the studio head. And a lot of the studios have varying tastes of different age groups. So it's like you kind of have to play like a mind reader almost, just to think maybe they'll like this, maybe they won't. But as time goes by, you kind of see what people, lean towards, and then it gets easier over time. But it's like, it's a little bit of trial and error, so I try, but I cater to everyone else,
Yeah, on top of that, I used to like, and he knows, but I used to come into the meetings, like the kickoff meetings, with like a song idea, and I quickly, and it would be something that was like from my taste or something I, just really wanted to cut with, and you soon learn that that's not a good idea.
And while you have you on the mic, and as a trailer editor, how do you collaborate with music supervisors and composers to sort of select the music? Because you just mentioned about the kickoff meetings. That's something that we typically do when the project is starting, right? Like a room with the studio heads, the producers, sometimes the supervisors and the editors. Like what typically happen in that room, and kind of how do you approach music from your perspective?
Yeah, so there's usually like a few like steps of kickoff meetings. Like obviously you have the one with the clients, and then it's really important there is just to listen to what they say, like take away like keywords and stuff about what they're thinking music wise, because that's who you're working for. So you want to please them. Yeah, and then we'll come back and then we'll do our own internal meeting. The more collaborative, the better. Get their input. We'll give our input. And then I really just, trust these guys to do their job. Like once we've had the creative conversation about the project and what the client said and what we're all thinking, just let them run with it. And then, they'll give us 10 or so songs and just get feedback off of there, or take one of them and run with it. But yeah.
So that's when the composers come in, right? That's when we start to get selections from the music providers, whether it's composers or labels or music groups, publishers, whatever. So this question is mostly for Jake, but also anybody could chime in. How do you ensure that your composition align with the emotional tone and pacing that the trailer editors and supervisors are looking for?
The first thing I'm doing is creating a very clear sound world from the first second. So whoever hears the piece is automatically going to have associations. They're going to understand the world they're in. So those things are really, really important, because once I've done that, what that allows me to do is then bring in all kinds of creativity and interesting elements, new things, interesting things, but it can't be so out there that people are going to not get it, or go, even if they love it, go, well, hold on, I like it, but how, my boss isn't going to get it, or this isn't quite what the brief says. So for me, it's a real delicate balancing act of hitting the blueprint, which everyone is familiar with, but injecting it with something new and fresh that can be exciting and hopefully help my track stand out from literally hundreds of others that they may be auditioning.
In your experiences, how critical is it to align music and sound design with the visual elements in a trailer? Because like for whether it's editing a trailer or just like trying to pitch a song, like what are the key moments in the visuals that you're looking for to see if the music or sound effects are going to work?
It's a really good question. There's the very simplistic and become rampant now kind of thing of when I go through the film, I just make a sequence of, I just call it hits. And it's like anytime somebody closes a door, anytime somebody, pours a drink, like any little sound effect diegetically that's happening on screen, I just put that there because that'll accent the music somewhere. Mm-hmm. And obviously you don't want to do it randomly, but it's like if we're already in this scene, or if that's like a good way into the scene, like somebody pops a bottle and then we see them at a table having drinks, talking. It's like, okay, that's cool. But yeah, there's a lot of different things. This is a very vague term, but like tone or feel of the visuals. Does that match a song? And then, I mean, even things like just like camera movements, like how fast does the camera move in this film or in like certain shots? And like sometimes that really, informs what kind of song you want to use it for.
Absolutely. And Jake, in your opinion, what are the key elements that a trailer composer should focus to better serve the visuals? Because sometimes when you do receive a brief, like most of the time you wouldn't be able to see the visuals, right? Sometimes you might have a reference cut, sometimes you might not. So you only thing you're getting are like maybe the tone, the reference tracks that you get. So how do you sort of serve up those moments for editors to cut?
Well, what I do is I'll take an existing trailer that probably one of these guys has cut. I'll work to it, but not specific beat for beat. I won't score it to picture, but I'll let it inform, for example, the way I pace things or the way I'll maybe build towards the back end in terms of the size I want to get, the intensity. So I'm always being responsive to the picture, and what I'll often do is use more than one trailer. So I'm not going too far down one rabbit hole. That one trailer might be particularly action based. I might go to something which is maybe more horror thriller, and then I'll keep working on my track to make sure it hits that mood as well. And that way, by the time my song's finished, when there's no picture, because they're only hearing it with a waveform, they're seeing the visuals that I've cut to. It kind of like, it's almost like they know what they want to use it for because I've baked it into the music.
Great drops and like spaces for voiceover and stuff that are building up for tension so you can help the editors to visualize, right?
Exactly. And I'm doing it to picture, so I have confidence that it's going to work when they do a whole new edit. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'd say it's a lot of shooting in the dark for like all of us. Like once we get the direction from the studio, we're ideating on something, he's ideating on something, he's ideating on something. And the more you collaborate and the more you get to know each other, it makes that process simpler. But from the beginning, it's a lot of shooting in the dark, and we kind of just put our best foot forward and, hope we win the trailer.
That's a great answer, because I was just going to ask, how can collaboration among music supervisor, editors, and composers be improved in the trailer creative space?
I think the biggest thing that I've like experienced and the problem I constantly see is with editors or producers, sometimes we don't know music very technically well, and so then there becomes this barrier. And so, and this goes for music in all aspects of everything, but like the more you can understand their job, like a composer's job, like what they're doing or his job, the more I get to know about it, and the more it can help you be specific, because the more specific you can be about like what you want. Like I remember like the first trailer I ever did, we were doing this custom of a song. It was like, it was Olivia Rodrigo, and we were trying to make it like horror. Like there was like this specific moment where it like turns into like horror, and we just like could never like nail it exactly. And I, first time editor or trailer editor, I had no idea how to put in the words, and the producer really didn't know how to put in the words. And so we just kept trying, and it never totally got there. And so it's like, it's just a good lesson of
My bad.
No. Stop. But yeah, just the more you can know, the easier you can make everybody's life, and the better you can actually collaborate, instead of just using these vague terms of like, well, it's not quite horror enough. It's like, okay, well, what does that mean?
And then I do want to break a little bit away from just the music, because there's one specific element that separates trailer from a lot of other, visual media stuff. Like, in shows and films and gaming, a lot of them have music, right? But something that really makes trailer different is the sound effects, the signature sounds, and all those stuff that are outside of music, but sort of companion the music elements. Just wanted to briefly talk about it, like what do you see as the biggest challenges when incorporating sound effects with music?
As somebody who is still technically a little behind on music, finding the right key of stuff is, a big thing, which is why, like, Jake, you were talking about earlier, when you bake a lot of stuff in, like, I personally love when that happens because it makes my life easier and it really, informs what I should be doing there. But yeah, I mean, and it could be tough because it's just like music. The sound effects libraries are endless oceans. And so like there's, some with our time constraints, sometimes I like don't even get to all the ones I want to listen to. But yeah, I mean, I'll just sit there counting through each one, turn, like, just like slight differences until I find the one I want. I mean, for me, yeah, it's just about feel, what I'm hearing. And, as time goes on, I get better and better at that. But yeah.
And for Jake, because I know that, we work on tracks and you do heavy production on those tracks where you're adding a lot of sound design elements into it, not just sound effects. And how do you sort of picture that soundscape, or like what helps you decide what to put in? Is it the visual that you're looking at, whether it's a temp visual or not, or is it something that you're hearing musically? What's your thought process on that as a composer?
Well, it's really making every sound has a purpose. So before I even choose a sound, there's an intentionality even why I'm going for that sound in the first place. Or let's say I happen to come across a sound that inspires me straight away. It's in my session. I'll open up a session soon and you'll see it's labeled and it's color coded because that sound, I might think is the coolest sound ever, but ultimately one of these guys has to know what to do with it, be inspired to do something with it. So every sound has a function. And then what I'm trying to do is go above and beyond what the basic function of the sound is. And that's when I can get creative. And I really like to play on the line between sound design and music. So my sound design is very musical and my music is there's a very strong sonic blueprint to it. So if it's a synth, it's going to have a very distinctive sonic, like you said, feel. It's going to feel a certain way compared to someone else's. So what I'm always trying to do is just put more and more of myself, of my taste, essentially, into the sound. So there's basically two parts to it. It's functionally choosing sounds that are going to work and allow these guys to do the job they need to do, but adding flavor where I can do something in one sound where maybe it might take 5 sounds in another context. So putting as much into one sound as I can, where you hear that one sound and it can be a signature sound. So you can hear it once at the beginning and it sticks with you. And then maybe I only bring it in towards the middle or the end. But every sound has to have a purpose and as much of a strong sonic blueprint as I can give it.
For Derek, this question, how can music supervisors play a role in that transition from like traditional trailer music or sound design to more innovative and like boundary pushing sounds, like the ones that Luke are discussing, like the more unique sounding ones?
I'd kind of like watch trailers and see what the trends are and try and predict where it's going to next. Maybe right, maybe wrong, but it's, again, an endless ocean. You just put your best foot forward and experiment with your editors and your composers and listen through all the albums that like sound design composers send you, and I guess really go from there,
Are there any specific sound effects or musical elements that you find increasingly trending in trailers today?
There's a lot of like vocalizations right now, like the
After Dune, right?
and and
Like twice, yeah.
yeah, a lot of that stuff. A lot of like the neoclassical, like string drama stuff. So I kind of stay away from that. I ain't try to be generic, man.
Drums never go away.
Yeah, drums never go away.
Big drums.
Big drums.
Yeah.
People always talk about like there's certain sounds associated to like some of the studios, like A24 had their A24 sound, whatever that means. Like, do you sort of see yourself categorizing some of these studios trailer styles just for your internal references, or like building up your folders?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. Like, how each studio, like as far as they'll go, I guess. So I guess for A24, you would say they would potentially take a lot of creative risks because I guess the art is more important, and then some of the studios, it's more about the commerce, like, and this is our job, right? It's like the classic battle between art and commerce. And where do we find the line of taking risks, playing it safe, and they'll do like testings with focus groups and we get feedback and then we kind of go from there.
Yeah, I feel like a big one that always comes up is like Marvel, like Marvelly, like stowing away certain library cues that like sound like Marvel pedigree, and usually it's not for Marvel movies, but for movies that want to trick people into thinking that they are Marvel quality movies. But yeah.
It's your first job? A little late for a career change, ain't it?
Rory, do you want to fix things with your son?
Couldn't look him in the eye. Mortgage, back child support, that's on me.
Rory, are you sure you've tried everything?
Not everything.
I got a once-in-a-lifetime score. You're the Marine?
Yeah.
You the ex-con?
Yeah, I did time, but you only gotta cast aspersions at me, guy.
I'm trying!
Good. Stop talking.
No alcohol detected.
Been about a week. The mayor's gonna be holding a party on election night. And there's gonna be money there, like none of you bums ever seen.
It's your first job?
I know what I'm doing.
A little late for a career change, ain't it? You're 60?
Quick question. If I'm giving instructions and they're not doing them,
Just say, I have a gun. What are you doing?
taking notes.
Taking notes on a criminal conspiracy.
Get down on the floor! Get on the... Tie him up!
You got like 6 zip ties, genius.
I have a gun!
We gotta find those guys before the cops do. And put them down before they can talk.
Everybody in New England is after us.
I gotta speak to you. I really need you right now, Doc.
I would be breaking the law.
What if I took you hostage? I mean, like, you know, with your permission.
What kind of conversation is this?
You're gonna love him.
Rory, you are driving recklessly.
I'm in the middle of a high-speed car chase.
Think about the person you wanted to be.
What kind of person do I want to be?
You walk out with me.
But I'm their hostage. And they're psychiatrists.
You're underpaid.
Yeah, no shit.
The fun thing with that one that makes it good to talk about was, when we did our initial kickoff meeting for that, the conundrum with that movie is that like the vibes we were feeling were like kind of dad rocky, because it's like Matt Damon, he's like 50, and it's just kind of given that, but they were very intent on making it like young. And because it's a very fun film, it's got Jack Harlow, it's got sort of that vibe. And the clients mentioned rap, and we're just like, I don't really know how we can make that work. And then it was good because we were just talking for like the longest time. Music Soup team, producers, me, and then eventually we just kind of stumbled onto this idea of, well, what if we mashed them up? And combine it both, so we get a little bit of both. And we're like, oh yeah, if we can make that work, let's do it. And luckily, we already had like a really cool Steve Miller Band custom, just in the reservoirs, and I had them pull just the vocals of the Biggie song, "Give Me the Loot." Both are about robbery, obviously, which helped, but just to see if it would even work. And then I start laying it in at certain points, to match the visuals, match the beat. And I was like, oh, this actually does work. And then,
we had that same composer who did the original, like Steve Miller custom, take a stab at it. And then we got a few different looks from other trailer libraries and composers. And then we kind of hone in from there, you know, like Jake was saying, it's like we reach out to composers to like with the idea, right? And basically we kind of map it out for them. Sometimes like he'll have like a rough edit, or sometimes we're just like, hey, run free with it. Someone had did that previously for the Steve Miller song, and then we kind of like tempted in and then tempt in Biggie, and then
Yeah, and what they're adding, they're just like adding, you know, sound design elements that really go with the song and or like transform it in a way. You know, just hits, rises.
trailers are kind of almost in 3-act structures or 2-act structures. So like there'll be like an intro, middle where you know, give the stakes, and then like this big, fun, bombastic back end, or, you know, whatever horror, whatever your aim is. You go from there, really. I think.
No, that's a great creative breakdown. I just wanted to sort of briefly touch on how the licensing aspects of it came together, because we all know that outside of the creative stuff, there are also going to be licensing involved, especially if you have multiple covers, masters, and, you know, tracks that you're using.
Yeah, I mean, the great thing about trailers is we're kind of purely creative, and like the studio worries about that. So this was pretty much unlicensable because it was like through the roof expensive. So the majority of our time on this campaign was like trying affordable mashups, trying different songs, trying different directions until they found the money, you know, and that happens sometimes. The gig is pivoting towards, you know, the studio's direction, our producer's direction. And luckily, like, we had such a strong version 1 because this guy crushed it that it lasted till the end. But yeah, I mean, licensing definitely was a nightmare. And luckily we don't deal with that directly, you know, like we'll talk to their music team sometimes to like figure out like, all right, what is the budget range we can work with? But that's pretty much as far as we go. So that's the nice part about trailers.
Well, and the thing that was complicated with this is technically both songs on their own would have been within the budget, but I guess legally, once you make it into a mashup, one artist can ask for parody. So Biggie was expensive, Steve Miller was less so, but then the Steve Miller people were like, well, we want what Biggie's getting. And I was like, oh, yeah.
How do you think people pay like does the studio pay a very close attention to the lyrics? Like usually, because depends on the projects, right? Sometimes they would want lyrics in it, sometimes they want just instrumentals. How does it usually balance out?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there are certain clients that really want the lyrics to help dictate the story, sometimes to a fault, because like it's difficult to find a song like this, I guess, saying exactly what they're doing, you know, and they kind of lead you on like this rabbit chase of the lyrics aren't saying enough. But there are some that are cool with it, you know, like lyrics don't need to mean anything. It's just about hitting the vibe, you know, so it's important to know who you're dealing with and what the preference is, and then you can start kind of ideating.
Okay, so this is a song called Run, and it's with the incredible Lava. If you didn't know, she's an amazing singer, songwriter, vocalist. So this was really, really fun to work on because we got to design the whole thing from scratch, from the concept to the lyrics to the sounds to everything. So I'm going to give it a play. Here we go.
want to talk about it first? And I can just chime in.
Yeah, so kind of cool to hear it out loud. Hopefully listening to it, there were some visual things coming to mind that you could see, maybe even just genres. The idea for this one was we wanted to hit horror,
Halloween.
thriller, action, Halloween, and towards the back end, I wanted it to be able to feel, like you guys said, like bombastic with a little wink to something fun. Obviously, Run is a very classic concept, so I wanted to not necessarily have it take itself overly seriously throughout the whole thing and just lend itself to any moments that the editor might want to throw in. Because although it's a serious feeling track, I wanted to, again, I'm always thinking of not just the song itself, but how is this song going to exist in the context of the picture? And even in a serious movie, there might be one moment of light relief, and the editor might want to put that in, because there's all kinds of reasons why different parts of the movie make the trailer. Yes, my sound is dark, it's ominous, it's edgy, it's all those kind of things. But if it's too much of one of the same thing, it doesn't actually give the editor what I'm trying to do, which is inspire them.
And you can almost visually see like the 3-act structure from just the waveforms. Because like a lot of times when you do look at the waveforms from the music that we're receiving, like you can clearly see that there's an intro section where things are less busy, and then you're trying to set the tone for whatever's coming, and then the second act where the exposition gets to build out, that's when we hear a lot of like eerie strings, like the chase, the ticking, all those like sound design elements start to come in. And then till the last part where we're absolutely trying to throw everything out there. The vocals are pretty sparse in this one. There are other songs that we collaborate on that are a lot more lyric and vocal focused, but this one isn't, because we wanted to leave room for like a lot of actions, a lot of voiceovers, and also didn't want it to sort of like take the spotlight of what's actually happening in the piece, right? So we did originally write out like a full song where we have like a verse, we have a pre-chorus, we have a chorus. But when we actually go into the production, when Jake started producing this entire track, that's when he started to like cut a lot of things, because we don't really need it for the trailer cue. Like if it's a commercially releasing song, then we might leave it in for some, hook or bridge, whatever it is. But then for this specific cue that we're working on, it wasn't the purpose.
Yeah, exactly. And the voice is such a great way to bring in a signature sound, because as soon as you write an original vocal, then you have a signature sound. So we start with the non-lyrical vocals at the top, and again, that's a nod to what's going on at the moment. That's very popular at the moment. I'm aware of that. So I like to bring that in to start with, so people say, okay, this is the world I'm in, this is familiar. But then I move into the original verse vocal, which obviously no one's going to have heard before. And then there's things like breaths, whispers, those kind of textures. I really like to use all of the voice throughout the whole song, so it's not just a vocal on top of track. I take all the little intricacies of Lava's vocal and I'll play around with it, and I'll pitch it, and I'll glue it into the track.
Yeah,
So
a lot of like voice transformations.
Yeah, a lot of pitching. You can hear at the end here, like for example, for me the most fun part of it is always the vocal. And then of course we have this.
Are we running out of time? Is it all just in my mind?
And actually, I think when we first wrote the song, it was called Running After You.
Out of time.
I was out of time. Okay, so running, and then it turned into something about running, and then I chopped the running into run, and felt like we had really come across like a very strong, it's slightly on the nose, but again, if it's done in a way where it can be used in lots of different things, then again, you're doing the editor a favor, rather than, like you said, coming up with like a very specific lyric about running out of time, and something very specific has to be happening on screen for that to make sense. I'd much rather come up with something like this. And then kind of let people figure out what they want to do with it. And again, the vocals, this is, we did a lot of stacking of
Did I do the
harmonies.
run on like my iPhone recorder? I feel like that's the one.
That was it. I was like, Lava, we're changing the concept to run. Can you just record me?
Yeah, he was like, I was outside. I don't know what I was doing, but he was like, can you just quickly use your iPhone and record like a couple of like, and also like run.
Yeah.
And I did that. and I give it to him.
That's correct. I forgot that. That's it. But then you listen to these beautiful vocals. These are all Lava's harmonies stacked up together. And then you contrast that with her saying a line with a vocal pitch on it.
Something's coming for you.
So, you know, you're basically making 3, 4, 5 different vocal hooks and weaving them all together and using them to enhance the story versus take away from it, which is really the challenging balance, because you want it to feel like a song, but at the same time, you don't want to be limited by a traditional song structure, which is why my arrangement up here is not fully trailer. You don't just see 3 sections, but it's also not verse, chorus, like a traditional pop song. It's basically a hybrid. So we have an intro, it goes into a verse, we build, we have a drop, instrumental, drop, build, and then at the end we have a sting.
And in terms of like production genres, because like a lot of the trailerizations or like trailer cues are very heavy orchestration focused, and I think something that we're hearing more and more in terms of what's popular, what's trending, are a lot of hybrid stuff, like whether you're incorporating some EDM elements that you can hear from here, and a lot of there's hip-hop elements, not in this track, but like I'm saying hybrid songs in general. They have a lot of like 808, they have stuff that like trap focus, but then they still have the orchestration going on top of that. So I feel like for a lot of like producers and composers, those are things that usually feel more fun to play around with, right?
Yeah, what I really love to do is go into the DNA of a genre, for example, hip hop. And instead of saying, okay, I'm going to combine hip hop with something else, I'll go in and go, well, what makes this particular drum hip hop versus trap versus dubstep? What is it? And by really getting into the nitty gritty of that, that's how I feel I've come across my sound, which is a combination of all genres. But like I said before, I'm very intentional about why I use one drum sound versus another. I want it to be a combination of all my influences, which is from UK grime to hip hop to drum and bass to dubstep to all the things that I love sonically. And obviously, having studied them, the amazingly fun thing about trailers is that you get to piece them all together in a way that hasn't been done before, because you're not limited to a genre. No one has to say, hold on, this isn't this. That's a good thing if they actually can't put their finger on what it is. It's just lots of fun to make, as you can imagine. It's really challenging to make it cohesive. But again, by sticking to, like classic things like this, you can never go wrong with things like this in trailers. Again, this is from briefs. The amount of times you see the clock ticks, you see that enough, you eventually go, okay, I'm not going to reinvent that wheel, but let me do it in a new way, potentially. Or even like I've done here, just very classic sounds, but I put them against a backdrop of something slightly more strange.
I really like how like you make the breath sort of like coming out of water type of sounding. Like automation, right? Did you?
Yeah, there's a lot of automation. Automation is basically very fine level control of what comes in and what comes out. So anytime you see something like going from quiet to loud, I'm automating it, loud to quiet, because it's all about, hopefully I've achieved this, but you guys can let me know, which is all about tension and release a lot of it. You set the stage and then you slowly bring the listener in, and then boom, you've hit them with something. That's a lot of what I'm trying to do, because it's very deceptive to look at the screen here and it looks linear. It just looks left to right. But actually the way I think about it, and this was a recent realization for me, is that I'm not just listening to two speakers when I work. I'm actually listening to the whole sound of the room. So when you're in a room like this, when you go to a movie theater, the sound is bouncing off all the walls and it's hitting your eardrum in that very three-dimensional way. As a music producer, you spend so much time looking at the screen, it can feel sometimes like all you're doing is filling up two speakers, but it's actually not. There's so much room you have to play around with. The low end here, the subs go down to such a low frequency, and then you can also play around with a really high frequency. So when I really started to work these tracks and make it feel like a larger than life soundstage, that's when I started to unleash, creative ideas that I wouldn't have had otherwise, because I just wasn't limited by the traditional structures of production where you're just receiving it without visual. The fact we've got visual and we're in a room like this, the imagination is really the limit to what kind of power the music can have.
This is actually my first time seeing his whole station and seeing all this track layout. Because when I recorded at his studio, I was just going like track by track, trying to get the vocal stacks and all that stuff. Like all the production, everything comes afterwards. So it's really amazing to see how it went from just a simple concept, like a few lines, and then into a fully, stretch out song. And I also want to like hear a little bit from the supervisor and the editors on like when you hear a track like this, like what comes to your mind sonically or visually or whatever, just in general.
It's pretty good.
It's really good.
No, but like he was saying, just giving us the dynamic to be able to, pick and choose. And like you said, using kind of broad lyrics opens up different doors for us really in different projects, because this is kind of a little bit multifaceted. Yeah, it could be used for a horror track, or it could be like a brand promo. Like there's a lot of things that we could cater it to, and that's what we appreciate in a composer.
Yeah, I mean, like I could name like 10 different horror movies coming out that could be used for. Like I think specifically we did an Alien trailer, and there's a moment where it sucks back to silence and the guy literally goes run, and it's like, so it's like
just like how it did.
Yeah, you always have that thing going on. But yeah, just the little like Foley details, like obviously the clock, that's a great way to tie it in and make it all feel very specific and customized, like because you get a nice shot of a clock and that starts that, and it makes it feel all so intentional and integrated. And then there's like the little, people call it like click, click, bang. So yeah, when you get that baked in, it's very nice.
But so I think, after looking at the YouTube video of the trailer cut and then seeing how a composer is approaching the production aspects, hopefully that gives a little bit of insight of how we approach the sort of the trailer and the music that are associated with it. And I do have two questions that I wanted to briefly touch on before we do the Q&A section. The first one is also, like, this is for everybody. What advice would you give to composers looking to create music that resonates with trailer music supervisors?
Well, there's for me, there's two parts to the answer. The first thing is, for me, a lot of it was curiosity of how does the end trailer sound the way it sounds? Like what goes into it? So a lot of that drives me, and it's so cool to hear these guys reflect the things I've found through my own study. Just the simple things like the clock ticking, and we're all aiming for the same end goal. So to know the role that I play is just one part of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like he was describing earlier, it's you kind of mixing genres. Like I like when you were describing your influences coming into play, we feel that as supervisors, and I guess in a lot of ways we look for authenticity and truth, because, in the trailer space, these tracks could sound very, very similar. And if you're listening to it all day and night, it gets kind of hard to find the needle in the haystack. So like he's bringing himself into the music. And I think it's very easy to hear that once you're in the space and once you've been like oversaturated with just like almost generic music of people just making it just to make it, which obviously there's a space for that, but that's how you kind of stand apart from the rest. And we just hope to find that really, you know.
And the only thing I'll add is, and you already touched on it, but like finding the moments, it's a push and pull of like when you can really bring something unique, you know, musically to it, and when you need to, I don't know if rely on is the word, but like don't be afraid of the commercial friendly things, you know, are going to work, like run or clock sticking. Like, yeah, it's been done before, but it works, you know, and clients like it. And so, you know, it's that pull and tug of that.
Hopefully that like, oh, sorry. And hopefully from now on, when you go to AMC, like don't skip the first 15 minutes because those are all of our work up there. I never skipped and I love it.
Final thoughts?